So that means that I can get started. Hi, everybody. Jerzy Drozd, cartoonist and teaching artist, doing some penciling in Clip Studio Paint. And I didn't think I was going to get to do this tonight. I thought that I had technical hiccups, but it looks like I've got everything working again. So we'll do 30 minutes or so of penciling, see how far I can get. Oh, I think I just used the wrong tool. I did. Whoa, big brush. Most people tuning in will know what this is. My Spotify playing ads for me. Thanks, Spotify. I guess I'm going to have ads running in here for a little bit because I don't have a premium Spotify account. I thought I could just stream in. I got it playing softly so you don't have to be pestered by the ads too much. So, as I was saying before, I discovered that I was playing ads. All right, maybe I should just not play music right now. Anybody who's been following me for any amount of time probably knows what this is. This is the Captain SRSLY comic that I'm penciling in Clip Studio Paint. Hope everybody had a good holiday. For those who celebrate holidays this time of year. Those who are watching this way after the fact, I hope you're just having a good time. And I talked about this comic, this very comic I'm working on right now, in a recent Lean Into Art episode. What was it, episode 340? No, 339. Service-driven design can make it better. In which I told the story of how this project was improved when I had to navigate sort of somewhat conflicting client desires. Figure out how to incorporate them all, and thinking about the people who are ultimately going to be reading this comic. Hey, Phil Rude. Thanks for hanging out with me while I'm drawing for a little while. Oh, Art Muffin Studio asks, and actually it's on the screen now because I'm testing out a new OBS setup where actually the chat is showing up on screen. What am I using, Pro or EX? I'm using Pro. And I haven't been doing a whole lot of keeping up with what the difference is between the two. The reason I never got EX was because it looked to me like the main feature advantages that it had was page management. Like, so you could have like a multi-page document. You could have like a pagination file essentially of your entire book. And I did have that way back when I was using Manga Studio 4 before it became Clip Studio Paint. And I didn't really use it that much. So it didn't seem to me like it was worth doing the upgrade. Now I know that the EX also lets you export to what's it called? EPUBs. And I think you can export it as a multiple page PDF, which actually would be kind of neat. Like for this particular project I'm working on now, I will have to submit a multi-page PDF to the client when I'm done. So in that case, that it might be advantageous for me to have it, but I haven't felt a huge need for it in my life. So it's just pro for me. And it's been that way for a long time now. And thank you for saying the nice things about the Lean to Art cast. So what I'm doing with this, yeah, it is a big price difference. And I mean, I'm convinced that EX is probably worth it. I just haven't until I feel that serious need, like until like it's like, oh, I can't do this without EX. I just once that need occurs, I'll be glad to pay for it. I'll have zero problems paying for it. So what I'm doing with these, and I can switch to my regular video for that, is I'm penciling in CSP, and then I've been printing them out on 11 by 17. This isn't Bristol. This is, here we go. It is this stuff. Hammermill color copy digital cover stock, which I got at like an office store for fairly cheap. I found out about this. I think Jake Parker talked about this paper a while back as being his favorite paper. So I just got a ream as a test just to see what it's like. It's very smooth. It's a very smooth grain paper, but it works great in an inkjet printer. But whoops, wrong thing. Switch to that. There we go. If you like a smooth paper, it's fantastic, and it's just light. It's just heavy enough that it takes ink really well. It's really easy to erase on if you do pencils on it. But it's light enough that it goes through an inkjet printer really well. I'm of mixed feelings on the smoothness. I've gotten really used to lately printing out my pencils on Canson watercolor paper and inking on that, and I really like the texture I get out of those lines. But this project, all the other books I have inked digitally, so I'm trying to match that look and keep like a smoother sort of line on it. Yeah, Phil, it feels like it is a little bit too smooth. I think when I was starting out as a cartoonist, like 20 years ago, I would have loved that paper. I really loved smooth. I hated sketchbooks that had like really textured paper, really rough paper in it. I really enjoyed smooth paper. It felt like it was easier to draw on, and my lines felt more smooth and graceful or whatever. I don't know. But now I'm like really kind of hooked on like the texture of a little bit more of a grit to the paper. Hello, Lucifer Storm. So you can see I'm freehanding most of this. I'm trying to keep this as fast and loose as possible. I've talked about this elsewhere, but this, like, I've been thinking a lot about something Chris Schweitzer said on social media a couple of years ago now, when he said, like, like in the publishing industry, advances are not huge. So it's really worth investing in developing a style that optimizes speed, that gives you like as good a results as possible, as fast as possible. So that it doesn't look hacked out, it doesn't look sloppy. It looks solid and professional, but produced as quickly as you can in order to justify, or in order to maximize your advance. And I'm not just thinking about advances now, I'm also thinking about just like making sure I have enough time to do all the stuff that I want to do. So if I can get a page done in like a little less time and it looks okay, and I trust myself that I can make it look okay with less time, let's do it. When I was starting out, I really did. I put a lot of stock in the idea that like it's got to take a long time, otherwise it's not very good. And depending on the project, it's probably true. But if I can find ways to find more efficiencies, make it work a little bit faster for me, all the better. And, there's no speed limit on this stuff, right? It's like, so like this page will probably take me, I'm going to hopefully, let's see, how long have I been streaming? 11 minutes, and I'm almost done with one panel. I mean, the hope is that I can get at least another panel, and then like the bottom panel with the figures, I can get those done before, 30, 35 minutes is up. To some people, that might sound really fast. To some other people, that might sound super slow. We all work different speeds, don't we? I'm not going to be a little bit cliche, but it's like I'm only trying to measure myself against myself on this, like based on like what tracking I've done on my comics work and how long it takes me to do. How much faster is it than the last time I did it? Because, I mean, to be like perfectly mercenary about it, it's like that's the only metric that really matters there. No clients could be like, "Oh, you drew this faster than name your favorite artist here." They don't care. So who am I really impressing there if I'm like winning against some artist who I might admire? All right, let's get that cape done. Come on. Oh, that's not good. That goes there. That goes that. There we go. Yeah, that's right. All right. Boom, boom, boom. Paint bucket. I'm going to save. It's always a good idea to save. You are not the first person to say that, Art Muffin Studio. Yeah, I've had other friends point out that my pencil lines seem like they're practically inks. Yeah, like some people would think that like this is like enough to work off of inks. I've never felt that comfortable working off of that loose. I probably would. That's probably the next threshold I got to cross, is like get myself comfortable enough to where like I could work off of these kind of pencils and get to pretty good inks. But I guess I'm just like a little uptight about it. I'm gonna fix this real quick. I posted this on social media today, and I wasn't crazy about the way it looked once I saw it. There we go. A little better. So yeah, I mean, if I worked off of roughs this loose, I probably could gain like another probably hour, a little bit more than that. And maybe that's something I can try in 2021. I've had a couple of friends point that out to me. And a couple years ago, I inked a comic, a collaboration project with my buddy Zach Giolongo. It was a comic called Dinosaur. I think you can still find it, the worldofdinosaur.com. And man, his pencils were structurally perfect, but they were a little on the loose side. And so like before I inked, I would go in and I would like just clean up a little bit, and I wouldn't mess with his structure at all because like I said, his structure was perfect. But I would just like clarify a few pieces just to make sure I understood them when I was going to inks. Yeah, I'm going to, like I said a moment ago, I'm going to print these out and ink them with brush pens. Oops. This is not done. Part of it for me, I think, this comes down to a little bit of like thinking about my experience drawing as well as like what the finished product is. Because there's like a couple layers to this, right? There's like, how does the thing look? Is it what the client wanted? Does it look pretty okay? Are the production values solid? But also, like, what was my experience drawing it? And when I'm inking, my preference is to only have to think about line value and not have to think about actually drawing anything. So, you know, we could go into that whole like old joke about like, well, then you're tracing. Well, yes and no, because I mean, yeah, I've got pretty like clear and, you know, pretty finished pencils underneath. But what I'm not thinking about very much right now is like, what are the line values that I'm going to use? What's going to be a thick line? What's going to be a thin line? How am I going to get like the contour of that line to like be just so? I really enjoy that part of inking. And so it's part of laying such a clear, part of making the pencils so darn clear is to give me that space to be able to really focus on just enjoying the act of inking the line. So it's partially that. And then it's partially also, I think, if I were to be honest, it's that I'm not trusting myself that I can actually pull off the drawing without like really strong groundwork. Strong groundwork, what does that mean, Jerzy? Well, I'm glad you asked, Jerzy. Strong groundwork means not only the structure, but also, you know, completing all the lines and clearly defining all the shapes in as unambiguously as possible. Well, Lucifer Storm, thank you for following me on Instagram. I think the URL is right below my video right now. Yeah, Instagram, Jerzy Drozd. I post all sorts of art of things that I'm working on. And again, if I'm being honest, part of the tightness of the pencils really comes back from when I was first starting. Like when I was first starting out, like back in the 90s when we were doing all the art on the boards, and I penciled really tight. And I was using non-photo blue, the wooden pencils that actually were listed as non-photo blue. You know, it said non-photo blue on the pencil. Nowadays, I use, it's like a uni nanodio mechanical lead. And it's just a blue lead. It doesn't say non-photo when I'm penciling on paper. But back then, it was these wooden pencils with non-photo blue graphite lead, whatever. And they were really kind of on the waxy side. And I remember when I would work with inkers, they'd get kind of ticked off at me and like, man, you penciled so dark and so tight that my ink isn't staying on the page. Could you loosen it up? I'm like, no. I want to make sure everything's there. I don't want you to have to guess at anything. So part of it is like coming from that. But I mean, gosh, that was, 20 years ago. I've had lots of time to experiment and try out different things. So it seems like I could loosen up my pencils. So for a little context on what I'm drawing here, in this comic, this character, this villainous, is broke into the superheroes' headquarters and is using this device that robs them of their emotions. It steals their feelings, and consequently drains like all their passion and literally all the color out of them. They turn black and white. And this is not a new idea. This was in a Powerpuff Girls episode, for crying out loud. There was like that mime character, like a little clown mime character who did that. Anyway, but I specifically modeled the device. It's referencing a device from a Transformers Gen 1 Season 2 episode, which I talked about on the 4 Million Years Later podcast, the Transformers podcast that I do with my buddy. That's why it looks like this. It's a little bit of a call out to the solar power tower from the episode The Master Builders. Does that matter? No, it doesn't. It just means that I have fun drawing the thing. Nobody's going to care about that when they read the book. I'm not going to high five any child who's like, well, that's clearly the solar power. I would high five a child who said like, oh, that's the solar power tower from the Transformers episode. I'd be like, wow, how'd you know that? But it's not some Ready Player One sort of thing where I'm like trying to lay a clue for anybody to get and then get like bonus points from me. It's just, again, this is me thinking about like how much fun this is for me to draw. It's something I've thought about in the last, I want to say like 8 years. I remember I was talking on my comics podcast, Comics Are Great, which I haven't updated in ages, but it used to be like this interview show that I did. And I caught myself saying to a fellow artist, like, oh, how long did that take? And when I caught myself saying it, I was like, you know what? I don't want to measure a project's value on how much effort it took. That matters, but like that's not the single determining factor. How about I change that perspective and say, like, how much fun was it to do? And I started asking that. And just asking that question got me thinking about, well, Jerzy, are you having fun doing this? How can you make this more fun for you? I'm going to move this over. This is why I love digital penciling. Doing stuff like that. That would have been a redraw on paper. Oh, thank you, Phil. Yeah, I liked doing that show. That was a fun project. It was a weekly interview show. It was a lot of work. It was worth it. Finding the time to do that now would be really challenging. Because the way I prepped for it is I would line up a guest, and then a few days before the live stream / interview, I would read a bunch of that guest's material, read their comics, read their blogs. I would read as much as I can about them, and I would especially try to look for them talking in interviews or blogs, because I really wanted to get in their words a sense of what their philosophy was. And then on the Comics Are Great show, which you can still find, it's on my YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, I mean, all the episodes from like episode like 14 to 80 something are on my YouTube channel. I would try to find a way to very playfully and lovingly get them to defend their philosophy. So like, I think your philosophy is this. I'm going to come at it. I'm going to ask you a lot of why and how questions. So it sometimes is about process. It's sometimes about like materials and procedure and things like that. But mostly it was about like really getting to understand other artists, writers, creative people, and why they do what they do, and what kind of ideas inform their choices. So it was fun to do, and I feel like I got to know a lot of people that I really wanted to. But gosh, was it work to do that every week or so when I was doing it. Yeah, Phil. Yeah. If, well, depending, I mean, like you could do an interview where you really don't have any prep and say like, okay, tell me about yourself. Um, for me personally, I just feel like that's not very respectful to the guest. I mean, it depends. My sense of responsibility and obligation to the guest as I really wanted them to feel celebrated and seen. And so I thought that that approach of like really like trying to dig in and infer their philosophy was my way of doing that. Now, you know, not everybody's going to see it that way. Some people are going to feel very defensive about that. Thankfully, I don't think I had any interviews that went that way. But I could see how somebody might not be like super keen on that kind of line of questioning. Oh, Phil, thank you for saying that too. Yeah, I hope that's what the tone of what I do is that, again, it's this idea of like, this stuff is serious. This stuff matters. We're making art. Art matters. It matters to us because it comes from a very, very personal place. Um, it's often not understood by many of the people around us. Um, but it's like we get to do this, right? Like this is something I was talking about this with. I was doing a visit with high schoolers, and they're asking me really great questions. Actually, one of them said like how do you even stay motivated to do this thing all the time? Like, because there's days where I just don't feel like drawing. I'm like, I get it. This is a job, and there are days where I get up and I'm like, I don't want to do what I got to do today. And I said that one of the ways that I cope with that and sort of make it make sense for me is I try to reframe it by saying like, this is a thing I get to do. It's not a thing I have to do. It's something I get to do. As dumb as that sounds, as much as that makes me sound like a boring old grown up, but like I try to think of all my projects with like some kind of spirit of joy and playfulness, and a real one too. It's, it's like I when I go to, back when we could go to Comic Cons and festivals, I really loved going and meeting other comics people and creators. And there we go, Dame Lady Cat. How much time we got left? Okay, got 5 minutes or so before I gotta peel. Ah, don't get me wrong. There's lots to be upset about in the industry, in the world. I'm not trying to lighten anything or like um, diminish anything. Just saying there's a place for also engaging with things in a spirit of joy. Depending on your style, right? Because I have my share of friends who are real sourpusses and a little bit on the dour side, and am equally delighted by them. Okay, there's Dame Lady Cat, robbed of her feelings. Let's hide my background layer. I'm going to turn on my paint bucket. And save. I'm going to hit save often. Oh, come on. Let's see, like this right here is something I would not feel comfortable inking. You know, it's too loose. It's too loose for me to work with. Get a bigger line than that. Ah, Phil, that is super kind of you. I mean, and to be going back, bringing up Art and Story, which is like what, 10 years ago now when that podcast ended? That was a fun project. I remember being so nervous when we do that podcast. I would get so tightly wound. And then Mark would just get me laughing, and he was usually fine. Keep over this. Oh, a little bit more. There we go. I remember at that time when we were doing the Art and Story podcast, and when and Kevin and Josh were doing the big illustration party time. It didn't. I don't remember there being a lot of other kinds of art process shows at the time. There were lots of comics podcasts, but they were really focused on the perspective of readers, which is great. But it meant that, like, I remember Mark and I were just like really frustrated at the time that, you know, there wasn't anything like talk about the process or the kind of things that we were concerned about as cartoonists, right? It's great to have an interview with, say, Jim Lee or Will Spataccio or whoever is like the latest, you know, working on the latest Batman book or whatever. And you get a little bit of talk about process, but really it didn't dig into the stuff as deeply as we would have liked, which is why we said, like, well, why don't we just like put the conversations we have on the phone, let's just like record them and put them out there and see what happens. And that sounds like we were being very glib, but like I said, I was also like just so tightly wound whenever we got ready to do an episode. I was so worried about like doing a good job of it, and I felt like even though like we didn't have like a huge listenership when we started, I felt like this is for the permanent record, you know. This could like affect my career in some way. Yeah, Haviland, Javier Hernandez, I love that guy. He had one, and then there was like Escape from Illustration Island was another one. It also just felt like it was an exciting time for podcasting in general, like the idea of podcasting, because like it was still kind of hard to do. It wasn't super easy to do, but like new stuff was happening, and a lot of people were trying different things. Like there was that TalkShoe live radio sort of app. You could do like live call-in shows. And we did like that live Art and Story show for a while. And it felt really exciting because like before podcasts, cartoonists really, like, unless you met them at a show, unless you went to a festival or a convention, you really you didn't have any sense of like what their voice was like, what their personality was like. And I remember, this is something that like really made me motivated to do podcasting, was I remember when I saw George Perez for the first time, at a comic festival, and like he just did not. He was a lovely, perfect gentleman. I did not have a bad experience, but in my head, I realized very quickly I had a very different picture of who that guy was, and it dawned on me that like, oh wow, yeah, we really only get to know these people through their art. We don't get to know them and hear what their perspective and worldview is like ever. I thought this is like an unprecedented time where artists can actually put their voice to their work. And while not everybody needs to do that or should do it, only if you want to, but we can. So I wanted to try. Oh yeah, Webcomics Weekly was another one. That's right. Yeah, and then that you had the Daily Affirmation with Scott Kurtz and Chris Straub. And that was a talk show. And I'll not deny it. That was partially the inspiration for when Mark and I did, what was it called? Art and Story Extreme, which was like a daily sort of like studio chat show where it's like, okay, we're not going to really talk about any storytelling topics, but we're just going to talk about like whatever was on our minds this week or today while we were working. TalkShoe was a really neat and interesting service in that like you did it all through the web browser and you just like called a number. And the audio quality wasn't super awesome if you did like the live version, but like just the fact that you could have like a call-in show without any special equipment was kind of crazy. Kind of super cool. And it was fun listening to like a whole bunch of different talk shows just to hear how different people approached it. Like, I remember there was one fella who like it was just him in his office alone. And I don't even remember what like his job was, but like he would just be like, I live in Hawaii. You want to listen to what it sounds like in Hawaii right now? And he'd put his microphone out the window and just let it listen to birds for a little while. So it kind of felt fun and exciting in that there was like a lot of people trying a lot of weird stuff. That's right. The Art and Story Extreme show had like that explosion at the end of every intro. And that was a fun bit of creativity, was like coming up with like silly intros that would change day to day. They weren't always winners though. I mean, there was that one when Mark and I were trying to do British accents and boy, we knew we were not doing a good job. Okay, there's our big bulbous character whose power is he can make bad smells. I'm going to make one of his little gaseous things around him. Thinking like the idea here is like, okay, to a 7-year-old, what feels like transgressive humor? Well, poo and fart and pee, right? So let's have a villain whose power is basically that. And save. All right. I am at time. So let's see how far we got. I got 1, 2, and part of 3 panels done in this stream. I am actually going to be trying out doing this on a regular basis, like actually scheduling these. So the goal right now, what I'm playing with is mornings, which is kind of a drag, but like that's the only time in the schedule when I have the uninterrupted blocks where I could do like an hour of live streaming. But if you want to follow me on Twitch, it's Jerzy Drozd on Twitch. And I'm thinking about doing, like I think Mondays and Wednesdays. I think that's what I'm doing. But I've got on my calendar. I'll put out some more information about that soon. But that's one of my goals this year, is to do a lot more live streaming and actually doing it on a scheduled basis. So, thanks everybody for hanging out with me and watching me draw along, watching me draw, and hanging out with me while I draw. And I'll see y'all next time. Jerzy Drozd, jdrozd.com, Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.